Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it gives me no pleasure here today to have to utilize the House's important time to respond to what is an obviously misconceived motion by the member for Barataria-Sawa. A motion where, despite his attempts to put it on paper as to what we were coming here today to debate about, he drifted all over the place and did not address even his motion. It sounded like a defense, and I'll get to it in a short while, a defense to the population who looked on exactly a week ago at the business that took place in this chamber, and coming out of that were in absolute shock. A population that was forced to see the irresponsible behavior of a UNC opposition once again in their failure to support the anti-gang legislation that they first introduced in 2011. But you see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, through you to the population, I remind them and all looking on that we're dealing with a wounded UNC that has lost 2 elections in the last 4 months. A UNC opposition that lost an election on the 10th of August and lost another election on the 3rd of November. We've come here today once again to deal with a misconceived motion by the UNC that does nothing more than attempts to politicize crime. Politicize crime at a time when we have been calling on all involved for their support. Because you see, all we're doing today is trying to mask, trying to change, trying to convert the behavior of a most irresponsible amalgamation of elected members of parliament who 1 week ago told this country, despite the pleas of the police service, this has nothing to do with the government on this side. It was the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service that requested exactly a week ago in this parliament the support of all parliamentarians for the passage of the anti-gang legislation. And the population took note of it. And we've heard what the population has been saying. We've heard what the police have been saying. So you can read from Figuera, you can read from textbooks, you can read all of the theory you want in the world. The persons who are constitutionally charged with the responsibility to protect and serve us and to deal with crime asked for the passage of the anti-gang legislation. The UNC has gone down for the 3rd time in the history of Trinidad and Tobago in failing to provide the police service with what they requested to fight gangs and gang criminality in Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to use this opportunity, Mr. Deputy Speaker, through you, to also remind the population that not too long ago, the UNC opposition also failed to support the bail amendment. And all the bail amendment was again requested by the police service. And I've seen the Commissioner of Police time and time again go to the population holding up heavy arms. Let the population understand that they also refused to support a bail amendment that said anyone held with an automatic firearm, which is built only to kill people and built for war, will be denied bail for 120 days. In Barbados, if you're held with an illegal revolver with 1 round of ammunition, you don't get bail for 2 years. That's how you deal with it. In Trinidad, we can't even get a UNC opposition to agree that anyone held with a bomb, a hand grenade, or an automatic firearm should not be out on the streets of Trinidad and Tobago. That is the UNC. So fail to support anti-gang legislation, but come here every Friday to talk about the state of crime. It's the police that asked for the anti-gang legislation. Failed to support a bail amendment that says if you're held with an automatic firearm or a hand grenade or a bomb, an incendiary device, you shouldn't be on the streets. But it is the UNC opposition who want that. And let the people of Trinidad and Tobago take note yet again, as they are doing. So what you heard today, a short while ago, was a plea by a young man who's being misled. That is Barataria Sawa. And I'll come to why I say he's being misled. A plea by him to the population, please forgive us. The UNC opposition will not be forgiven. And yes, I say it on the Hansard here today. Gang and criminal activity, and every time someone unfortunately meets their fate at the end of an automatic weapon in Trinidad and Tobago, it rests solely on the doorstep of the UNC. A most irresponsible opposition. He had the audacity, he being the member for Barataria Sawa, who has run out of the chamber now, had the audacity to say that they supported the interception of communication amendments. They did not. The interception of communication amendments to which the member for Barataria Sawa was just referring was to allow us to use intercepted conversations, etc., by persons who are inmates in a prison with persons on the outside, to use that as evidence, to bug them, to use that as evidence again, to go to the heart of criminality. And the Attorney General could correct me if I'm wrong, but they failed to support it in the Senate, and the member for Barataria Sawa was there at the time. And I wonder why. Is it because there were certain other members in the Senate at the time who are now in the House, but not here in the chamber right now, who are busy having those conversations up and down with people on the inside of the prisons? Is that the reason why? Is everything that the opposition does always self-serving? And then they want to come here today and talk about crime? On his motion, the member for Barataria Sawa, one of the things he said, and he touched on it a short while ago, about us under-resourcing. And then the leader for the opposition, who again isn't here today, has been in the public domain saying about state contracts and where state contracts are going and how money is being spent. And the member for Barataria Sawa's motion that we're here to deal with today talks about us under-resourcing the police service, under-resourcing the office of the DPP. I want to take the opportunity through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to remind the population of Trinidad and Tobago, who are no fools, that this country is dealing with a reduced revenue stream. That is our reality. And thank God it is a PNM administration managing the economy during this time of crisis. Because I will remind the population now, just using 4 examples, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of how it would have happened. This is not supposition, this is not hypothetical. How it happened, I should say, previously. There was an OAS contract to build a highway to from San Fernando to Point Fortin. The day before a general election, the last working day, after the UNC took a decision to use cash to build the highway, to make sure that no lending agency had oversight on where the money went. They awarded the contract to OAS under dubious circumstances, didn't borrow money but did it from alleged cash flow, and then on the last working day before an election, amended the contract to take out a clause that allowed the people of Trinidad and Tobago to terminate OAS who were not performing because they were bankrupt in Brazil and accused of corruption in Brazil. We had to go all over, up to the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, to recover $1 billion for Trinidad and Tobago. Another example, the Beetham wastewater plant. Let the population remember through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, again, over $1 billion of a contract given to Mamu. $1 billion in cash again, no borrowing. I believe there was a debate or an attempt to debate it in the House when the PNM was in opposition. Of course, he struck down. But I want to tell the population how this PNM administration is looking after its interest. Because people shouldn't forget, over $1 billion in cash given to MAMU to build a wastewater plant that is a waste, and used NGC money to do it. Well, you see, Mr. Speaker, what the population will hear here today is that once again, the parties involved in that came up with a sham transaction. MAMU had a sham transaction to try and prevent the NGC from getting to the money. Right? And I will read the decision. It's no longer sub judice because the court decided that what MAMU was doing with the money given to him by the UNC was a sham transaction. So to come here, and the reason I'm referring to it is to let the people know what the PNM government did. Because immediately on us coming into office, it was one of the first things we tackled, white-collar corruption. So don't say we didn't take it on. Don't try to mislead the population and say that we did not go after the corruption. It's right here. This is the decision, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Before Madam Justice Joan Charles, 20th of February this year. 20th of February this year, because when we came in as a government, immediately we froze the assets of MAMU by December of 2015. But let me just quickly tell the country about the case of NGC, National Gas Company, versus Super Industrial Services, SIS, owned by MAMU, who's in Panama now. The NGC has made a claim under this government in the pursuit.
1 second. Member for Laventille West, please. I'm hearing you making little overturns, please. Silence. Proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I could understand why the member for Laventille West is becoming emotional. Because we have to sit here and listen to those who may have participated in corruption lecture the country. The NGC, and I want to let the people of Trinidad and Tobago know here today that this government directed the NGC, and the NGC has brought a claim against MAMU's company, SIS, for over $436 million for the Beetham wastewater plant. And what was found on the 20th of February of this year by a High Court judge is that MAMU engaged, SIS engaged in this Beetham wastewater plant in sham transactions with a company that was incorporated by the then chairman of NGC. Under them, the then chairman of NGC facilitated it. And now we have in black and white by a High Court judge of Trinidad and Tobago saying and finding, making declarations that SIS made deeds of mortgage to delay, hinder, and or defraud the NGC.
On a point of standing order 48-1.
Overruled.
You see, the relevance of this member for Couva South is this government does its work. This government fights corruption. And this is one example. I come into more. So the court has declared that SIS made deeds of mortgage to delay, hinder, or defraud the NGC. And it set aside these mortgages. So the NGC is pursuing a claim for over almost $500 million for the Beetham wastewater plant. That is number one. You want to talk about how you should use resources? I remind the country again, through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that in August of 2015, just about a month before a general election, close to $500 million were borrowed by the EMBD. Close to $500 million, not only borrowed, but disbursed to certain people under the direction of the member for Orapuch East. And I will read two decisions of the High Court, one of the High Court and one of the Court of Appeal with respect to that. So I'm telling the country here again today, I am not going to sit down here as the Minister of National Security and hear somebody...
Member, 1 second. Again, member for Naparima, please, I just spoke about the slight outbursts from members. I'm not tolerating it today. Proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. You see, because this seemed to have slipped under the radar, how we are dealing with and dealt with corruption. That $500 million borrowed and disbursed in the space of a month. Is there actions in the High Court that are being pursued? But as part of it, we followed the money. We followed the money, and there's now a Court of Appeal decision that the population deserves to know about, because they need to know that this government is not only fighting the gangs, fighting the crime and criminality, we're also pursuing white-collar crime. There is a Court of Appeal decision, Civil Appeal number P16 of 2018, between Ravin Ramkisoon and EMBD again, and a number of banks. So a civil appeal determined by a three-court panel, three experienced Court of Appeal judges, Ravin Ramkisoon and EMBD, Bank of Baroda, First Citizens Bank, First Citizens Investment Services Limited, RBC, JMMB, and Republic Bank. And the population needs to know what happened in this. Paragraph 3, EMBD is involved in litigation with a number of contractors concerning civil engineering works. Its case is that certain contractors and other persons conspired to form a cartel that dishonestly manipulated the tendering process so that contracts were awarded to predetermined contractors at inflated prices, and that these contractors engaged in other acts of dishonesty and impropriety. As part of its investigations, EMBD sought and obtained its first Norwich Pharmaceutical from a judge in May 2017. A Norwich Pharmaceutical order is to pursue and follow the money in the civil courts. This gentleman, Ravin Ramkisoon, received a sum from contractors coming out of that same $500 million of $13 million. So EMBD went following the money, right? And what the Court of Appeal found, before I get to that, at paragraph 16, the evidence before the Court of Appeal was the case for EMBD, which is that certain named contractors, quote, with the intention of enriching themselves and injuring EMBD, knowingly procured and or obtained the EMBD contracts, certifications, and payments from EMBD by reason of collusion between themselves and others that was designed to ensure that specific companies, by a wrongful and unlawful agreement or combination, were awarded specific contracts at inflated amounts and received payments that were not due. These are the cartel arrangements. Further, it was EMBD's case that the then Minister of Housing and Urban Development and certain representatives of EMBD, quote, participated in the cartel arrangements and or inappropriately sought to favor EMBD contractors for the purpose of giving effect to the cartel arrangements. That's what the court is saying. It then goes on to say, at paragraph 21, Mr. Rudder refers in his affidavits to SMS messages between GP, the minister, and one TR of TNR, a company which received contracts and is alleged to be one of the companies involved. And he refers to the SMS messages, the text messages, and the interventions made by TR and the minister. And this is the important part. This is not me saying this. This is the Court of Appeal of Trinidad and Tobago, unanimous decision by 3 judges, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Paragraph 22. The court has carefully examined the affidavit evidence that was before Mohammed J. On this evidence, we are unable to conclude the judge was plainly wrong in finding that a wrong has been carried out or arguably carried out by an ultimate wrongdoer. Because you see, the person whose account the money was followed into appealed to the Court of Appeal and said, you shouldn't do this. This is now the Court of Appeal saying that the judge wasn't wrong. He should have made the order. He could have made the order, and he should have made the order. And they go on to say, the evidence before the judge, in our view, went beyond mere suspicion and provided an evidential basis for at least an arguable case that a wrong has been carried out against EMBD. So you see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's easy to come in here and try to create clouds of doubt in the minds of the public that this is not a government that is serious, and this is not a government that for the first time is actively pursuing white-collar corruption. But that is happening, and I came to give the assurance to the population today, amongst others, that that is taking place. There's another decision, but I'm running out of time. This was given by Justice Abood a week before elections in August of this year. And I will find the opportunity on another occasion to read excerpts of that decision, 124 pages by Justice Abood. Again, a certain member of parliament who's not here in the chamber is a defendant in there. But ultimately what the judge found, when they tried to have the case thrown out preliminarily, is, hey, these serious allegations, there's sufficient evidence here to support that there's an arguable case to be made, and these need to be determined on the merits. In other words, you have a case to answer. And that too is being pursued. So don't come here and try to fool the people. Another thing I've taken on the front too, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in this motion, and I'm going to tell the population today, it starts off, the second paragraph, whereas the government has failed in its management of the organs responsible for intelligence. Because you see, I've realized there is a concerted effort and attack all of the time by the UNC opposition on the intelligence services of Trinidad and Tobago. And as the Minister of National Security, I can't allow that to continue because it is unfounded and it is unjust. So I stand here today as the Minister of National Security and as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago who was given an opportunity and a privilege to work with certain people to tell the country, fear not, your intelligence services under this administration are independent and they are doing their job. Because you see, there's been a proper appointment of directors of intelligence in Trinidad since 2015. And I keep watching the attacks, and I I understand why they're attacking that particular organ of intelligence in this country. But today, I thank all of the intelligence officers, all of the persons in the SSA and other intelligence officers who are giving on a daily basis yeoman service. Because under this administration, it has been properly rebuilt. There's no Reshmi Ramnarayan who used to answer telephones heading it. There's no dismantling of facial recognition. There's no destruction and stealing of servers being used by intelligence. So stop attacking the intelligence services. I thank them for their work. And through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to put on the Hansard one small example, but the population will understand how important the example is of how functional our intelligence services are, how well they're working. Last year, when there was no COVID and we were traveling, I was on business in Tobago. And as I was waiting to leave the hotel, a taxi driver asked to speak to me. He said, "Sir," I said, "Yes." He said, "I would like to thank you." So I said, "Okay, well, it's nice to get thanked. What are you thanking me for?" He said, "My son is a prison officer." He said, "And you all saved his life." Immediately, I knew exactly who this gentleman was talking about. And I told him, I called his name. He didn't introduce himself by name. He was shocked. I said, "It's not only once, Mr. J. It was on 2 occasions your son's life was saved as a prison officer. And you know why? It's because the hard work of the intelligence services of Trinidad and Tobago. And I thank them for continuing to do that work because they do it, they're attacked, they constantly hear and see the attacks in this chamber and in the next chamber. But they do their job and they do it properly under this administration because there's no interference under this administration. I just want to clarify, because I don't have enough time, unfortunately, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But I can't let some of what was said by the previous speaker sit unopposed. The first is, give the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard diesel and feed officers complete hogwash. There is no shortage of diesel with the Coast Guard. The officers are being properly fed. Let's talk about one vessel. There's not only one vessel working in the Coast Guard, but it continues to be in the UNC opposition's way a concerted effort. On one hand, they attack the organs that are performing national security duties relentlessly, and then on the other hand, scream about no proper border patrol. They are the ones attacking the police. They are the ones attacking the Coast Guard and the Defense Force. They are relentless in their attack on the intelligence services. Let the population take note. But I, not as a minister, as a citizen, thank every single one of the officers in the police service, in the fire service, in the prison service, in the defense force, in our immigration, in customs, even the lifeguards. All of them are playing an important role. Can they always get what they want? The answer is no. But we will do what we have to. Talked about recovering $1 billion for the OPVs. He knew. I'm not talking about the OPVs anymore. And then trying to water down after having the audacity to ask a question before about the 2 Cape-class vessels. Yes, the Prime Minister led a delegation on the invitation of the Prime Minister of Australia, and the Australian government and people, through a defense fund, are helping us to fund those 2 Cape-class vessels. And I look forward to them getting here. The Daman vessels that may be down, it is because of COVID. That the shipyards and Daman in Holland, and I'm going to call in the ambassador of the Netherlands next week to meet with him, because the Daman persons don't want to fly to this side of the world to do what needs to be done with some of the vessels. But don't stand here and mislead the people, and stop coming and exposing what may be a perceived weakness. Is it because there are ties with the human traffickers? Is that what they're trying to promote? Another point that was made, don't buff, with the Prime Minister didn't buff Maduro. Everything for them in this house is about Maduro and about Delcy. But you know what? This side, this government, this administration does things on principle. And what is the applicable principle? We follow the UN Charter to the T. The UN Charter is recognize the elective government. As the Prime Minister tells us constantly, who will pick up the phone when you call? Who will pick up the phone when you call? So that is the government that we deal with. When the government, if it ever changes, we deal with the next government. But we do things on principle. For months, you heard those on the other side screaming for the fellow who lost on the 3rd of November. That's the other election they lost. On the 3rd of November in the United States. That's the one the UNC lost. Another loose statement made by the member for Barataria Sawa before he ran out the chamber. 16,000 Venezuelans who entered illegally. Again, they do this thing intentionally, try to mislead the population. Where he got 16,000, that might be by one of their members who is associated with illegal Venezuelans, but not by the immigration. Immigration registered 16,523 Venezuelans, both who came in legally and those who came in illegally. And all of them now have legal status. And we will continue to protect Trinidad and Tobago. Again.
Member, you have 2 more minutes.
Thank you very much. I just wanted the anti-gang. He continues, this young man from Barrett, who represents Barataria Sawa, continues to mislead the population. There are, and I will repeat it, certain offenses under the anti-gang legislation that comes to an end in 3 days' time that don't exist anywhere else in law. There is no other law to charge somebody for being a gang leader. There's no other law to charge somebody for harboring a gang member. There is no other law to anywhere for all of the offenses that are found in the legislation that was the anti-gang legislation. And I'll end by saying this, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And they know it. The population has judged on August 10th and will continue to judge the UNC opposition. And as a citizen, it pains me that they continue not to support legislation that the police service have asked for, those charged with the responsibility of law enforcement, and every single criminal activity linked to gang behavior in Trinidad and Tobago